Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thanks for making time today.
Good afternoon.
Well, stocks on Wall Street overnight had a nice bounce back from last week's losses. Of course, we're coming up on the Fed's annual retreat, normally held at Jackson Hole, so we should get some more clues about plans for tapering. The S&P and the Nasdaq at new all-time highs. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, if you look at the U.S. market, it seems to show very strong movement since last Friday. It continued to rise as of Monday. If you look at Dow Jones, jumped by 0.6%, hitting well above 35,000 level. And S&P 500 also went up by 0.9%, fresh high of 4,479. And particularly the Nasdaq, it climbed by 1.6%, almost hitting 15,000 territories, ending at around 14,943. Clearly, the growth stocks led Nasdaq seems to show very strong movement at the current point in time, as most of the people are saying that the uncertainty regarding the overall tapering seems to be easing. If you look at the Fed releases coming, if you look at the Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan said on Friday, he's been quite hawkish, but now he's reconsidering his hawkish stance as if the virus harms the economy. Investors are looking at less confident Fed Chair Powell talking at the Jackson Hole meeting this week and indicating that the timeline for overall reducing the central bank's bond buying program. And if you look at the speed of such, with the mentioning from the minute to the actual reduction of the purchasing program, it might not happen until the end of this year or beginning of next year. If that's the case, then U.S. market have more room for further rise, as we have seen such movement in 2013 May, when they first talked about it, and actually the implementation happening in December of 2013. And during that period of time, U.S. market continued to rally after the short correction. Now, if you look at the overall other countries, it seems that with the U.S. market rising and furthermore dollar stabilizing rather than continue to be appreciating, that means that further liquidity is available for the other emerging market or other market. And clearly the Asian market, who suffered the most, has recovered. And most of the other countries are all showing a rising trend. Furthermore, if you look at the futures market, it seems that the U.S. market would to continue rise towards the end of this day as well, given the fact that the liquidity is quite ample.
And the Korean markets today, it seems, taking their cue from Wall Street. The KOSPI and the KOSDAQ both up by a large margin. Foreign investors this week have returned to buying, and you did mention the dollar, and we have seen the exchange rate come down here in Korea. Tell us about the domestic market.
Yes, KOSPI was up by 1.56%, and KOSDAQ was up 2%. As you know, the Korean market has been suffering quite significantly in the last 2 months or so. From its peak to bottom, it corrected by more than 8%. This kind of correction was happening because of the foreign investors continue to be a net seller of the market, with the currency moving towards the very high level of as high as 1170, late 70 or 80 territories. With this kind of the movement, continuous uncertainty was actually happening. On top of that, as you know, the BOK were talking about possibility of rate hike before the end of this year, given the fact that the uncertainty lies with the consumer debt. And also there were quite a lot of measures coming through where the domestic commercial banks were actually not lending or increasing the consumer debt size. So all that has resulted into a weakness and uncertainty of the Korean market. But with the U.S. currency stabilizing, Korean won also seems to be stabilizing as well. With this, foreign investors, they're not major net buyers back, but nevertheless, they are no longer seller of the market. And with the liquidity condition being ample in domestic market, with the rate hike might not be happening anytime close, near soon, we saw Korean market recovering quite nicely. Most of the growth stocks were doing well. And even for the semiconductor sector, which is the largest market cap of Korea, showing quite nice recovery with Samsung Electronics rising by more than 3% today. And most of the other semiconductor equipment stocks were up well above that 3% territories.
And to zero in on a couple of particular companies for a minute, in the first half of this year, Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics had a global market share in the TV sector of right at 50%. That's pretty impressive, and both saw major improvements from a year earlier. Tell us about Korea, if you will, and the TV market.
Yes, we must say that Korea's overall market capitalization indicates that Korea's strongest sector, obviously, is the IT segment, including the TV area. The consumer electronics were the part of where Korea having very strong market share, both in the TV market as well as the various other consumer equipment. Now, LG Electronics and Samsung Electronics showed they have basically continued to show more than 50% market share, two companies combined, and maintain their leadership in the premium segment. Samsung accounted for 31% of the global TV market in terms of sales revenue, and also LG followed by 19%. Adding these two up, it was above 50%. Also, thereafter, if you look at the other countries' major companies, Japan's Sony came in at about 9.3% in market share, and other company with a 7.3% Sensei. By the volume, Samsung made 21.2% of the global market share. And if you look at that, it continued to be topping 20 million plus units since 2016. That's quite of a result that we have seen. And also LG is continued to be selling quite significant amount. LG sold 13.56 million TVs in the first half. It's rising by 25.8% from a year earlier. So clearly, increased supply and enhanced price competitiveness of the OLED display is making LG continue to be gaining its market share. So all in all, TV market and other consumer electronics market, Korean companies are continue to remain at one of the highest market share players. And if so, then we think that with this fourth industrial revolution happening in a global scale, we think that Korea's electronic sector or the IT sector would continue to remain at one of the top players, and therefore we expect that share price movement should be in the right track to rise further.
And finally, Mr. Yu, in cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin's seen an improvement in the past week. The price above $50,000 as recently as last night for the first time in a few months, retreating a bit now. But what do you see driving this recovery?
Right. As you said, the Bitcoin has finally surged above 50,000 mark as the virtual currency continues to climb up out of the month-long slump that we saw in the earlier month. Now it is first time Bitcoin has reached above that 50,000 mark since the May 15th of this year. Ethereum was up more than 3%. Dogecoin also rose by about 2%. This kind of continued movement is obviously the cryptocurrency is becoming one of the alternative assets for investors to invest. And a lot of the asset management companies as well as other financial institutions are considering cryptocurrency as a part of asset they need to invest. And announcements are all coming from the various other countries where they're considering the Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency as a part of the purchasing element or purchasing size, purchasing factors. So with this, obviously most of the people are looking at Bitcoin as the alternative asset. And if you look at the overall money supply growth that you are seeing in a global scale, we think that currency are depreciating in terms of the value itself as far as the cash is concerned. And that leads into the cryptocurrency or alternative assets value to rise further. All in all, from beginning of this year to the right now, we did see the cryptocurrency rising quite rapidly. But as for other alternative assets, gold and silver really didn't do too well. So more and more people are focusing on this cryptocurrency segment rather than other alternative asset as a currency or alternative currency to play. And we think that that kind of trend would continue with what we are seeing in the fourth industrial revolution so far.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll leave it there for today and catch up with you again later this week to see where the markets are then. Thank you, as always, for coming on. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.